Hello and welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of 8th of November 2023। तो आज का इम्पोर्टेंट आर्टिकल वन बाय वन देखते हैं। पहला जो है क्लोजर टुगेदर द प्रॉब्लम विद द 70 आवर्स ऑफ वीक लाइन a verdict that hampers international law obligations in troubled water in Qatar, the massive displacement in Congo, however, the MiG-21 fighter jet being phased out, understanding the fundamental of how electricity is transmitted, then Aditya L1 captures a first glimpse of solar flares, 7.5 million new cases of TB 2022, shows WHO global report. Where do domesticated silkworm cocoons get their wild colors from? साइंस का पेज है। तो पहला आर्टिकल है क्लोजर टुगेदर। The decision by India and Bhutan to focus on infrastructure and connectivity during talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Bhutan's fifth king Jim Kheser Namgyel Wangchuk is an important marker towards more bilateral-driven regional initiatives. A joint statement speaks of completing surveys for the Kokrajhar-Gelpu rail link that connect Bhutan to Assam and bringing discussion on another Bhutan to West Bengal rail link while also facilitating Bhutan-Bangladesh trade with yet another rail link and upgrading checkpoints along the India-Bhutan border. These plans foretell a future that could well change the development story of the region, including West Bengal and Northeast Bhutan's south and east Jongkhag's as well as northern Bangladesh. Bhutan's economy has been dependent on hydropower and tourism revenues and has been particularly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic as well as worries over global warming. A lack of opportunities has also led to immigration by educated youth and professionals. The new project proposed by the king to build a special economic zone at Bhutan's southern border with Assam and an airport at Gelefu are expected to drive growth and investment to the kingdom. In addition, Bangladesh's signing of a preferential trade agreement with Bhutan in 2020 would increase Bhutanese import of local produce and build more markets for Indian and Bangladeshi producers in the sub-region. India's energy exchange, which is bringing more Bhutanese and Nepali hydropower suppliers online while planning to distribute energy to Bangladesh and Sri Lanka will drive intra-regional growth and revenues. This would also power New Delhi's attempt at bridging the economic gap with the Northeast while drawing development partners like the World Bank and the donor countries like Japan into the creation of a sub-regional hub. Efficient and time-bound execution is therefore key to such ambitious plans. Given India's problem with Pakistan and sanctions on Myanmar for the 2021 COP blocking the path for trade and land connectivity to the east, working with other countries on the India's periphery to build connectivity markets, energy links is the most sustainable way forward. In the longer term, geopolitical conflict and anti-globalization trends are forcing regional groupings to be more cohesive, something South Asia has not been able to achieve yet. All India worries about China's push into South Asian trade infrastructure projects and strategic ties, including concerns over a Bhutan-China boundary agreement overhang over Doklam and India's chicken neck Siliguri corridor route. These are ideas which will offer more security and prosperity for the countries involved, with particular benefits for Bhutan, India's traditionally trusted partner in the region. The problem with the next problem with the 70 hours a week line. The startling comment by the Infosys co-founder N.R. Narayan Murthy that youngsters in India must say, "This is my country, I want to work 70 hours a week in order to make the country competitive," and the support he received from several members of India INC is undoubtedly an example of how captains of the industry can adroitly hide their just lost for profit by preaching virtues. More importantly, it is an argument that fails the limit litmus test on three counts. First, Mr. Narayan Murthy made a factually incorrect statement that extended working hours helped advanced countries such as Germany and Japan to succeed. Second, he placed the burden of increasing productivity on the soldiers of the worker when the reality is that they have underinvested in innovation, the critical factor for raising productivity. Third, Mr. Narayan Murthy's 70-hour week proposal violates international labor standards (ILS), the International Labour Organization (ILO) decent work agenda, and its fundamental convention that lay down the working hours in order to ensure that women and men get a decent and productive work. The ILS is increasingly becoming the prerequisite for gaining market access in advanced countries and for companies to participate in supply chains. Non-adherence to ILS could therefore seriously affect the aspiration of Indian industry to expand their presence in global market working hours in advanced world. Contrary to Mr. Narayan Murthy's argument, advanced countries have witnessed a continuous decline in working hours for worker during the past 150 years. In Germany, weekly working hours have reduced by about 59% from 68 hours to in 1870 to less than 28 hours in 2017. Japan had a 44-hour working, working week in 1961, the highest ever since 1950, which steadily decreased to less than 35 hours in 2017. Working hours tends to decrease when incomes rise and people can afford more things that they enjoy, including more leisure. In fact, in more productive economies, workers work less, while in the less productive, poorer economies, workers have to work more to compensate for lower productivity. In this context, the ILO has reminded us working time and work-life balance around the world that working hours and the organization of work and rest periods can have a profound influence on the physical and mental health and well-being of worker, and that decision on working time issues can also have repercussions for the broader health of a economy. In a country that is India, which considers its large young workforce and its most significant asset for future development. Mr. Narayan Murthy's speech for a 70-hour working week is nothing but a recipe for their early burnout. The leading light of India INC, who have triggered this controversy, need also to be reminded that the level of productivity of a country depends on the strength of its innovation system. India's reality in this regard was elaborated in the India Innovation Index 2021 produced by Niti Aayog. This report showed that in 2018, India's gross expenditure on research and development as a percentage of GDP was 0.65%, one of the lowest in the world. This figure dipped further 0.64% in 2021. According to the Department of Science and Technology, the DST also informed that the private sector share in this country R&D spending was 41% in 2021, a decline from 45% in 2012 and 13. It may be noted that in countries which have a stronger innovation system as compared to that of India's private sector have much higher shares. For instance, in 2020, the private sector share was 79% in Japan and Korea, 75% in United States, and 67% in Germany and the UK. Even in China, the private sector share was 77%. These figures constantly explain why, in general, Indian enterprises lack of competitive edge in global market due to lower level of productivity. The importance of the ILS. Ironically, a section of India INC has stopped a 70-hour of working week despite being aware that if it is implemented, this would be out of step with ILO's convention number 1 of the Hour of Week Industry Convention 1919. which had benchmarked an 8-hour average working day. Together with the ILO's decent work agenda, which deals with a decent working time, the ILS is increasingly figuring in global trade rules. Advanced countries are enlisting on the inclusion of the ILS in bilateral free trade agreement. Thus, the FTAs India is currently negotiating with the European Union and the United Kingdom both includes the ILS. The negotiating text unveiled by the European Union last year includes a chapter on trade and sustainable development, which says that as members of this bilateral FTA, India and the European Union shall promote decent working conditions for all. With regard to inter-ally wages and earnings, working hours, other conditions of work and social protection. The ILS is also central to the implementation of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, a 14-country grouping for promoting economic cooperation in the region led by the United States, of which India is a part. 6 months ago, IPEF members forged an agreement relating to supply chain resilience, seeking, among other things, to promote supply chain in which labor rights are respected and create market demand for sustainable and responsible sources of supply. Labor rights, according to this agreement, includes the ILO's fundamental convention, including acceptable condition of work with respect to minimum wages and hours of work. This implies that Indian companies can participate in the supply chains among the IPEF members only if they respect labor rights. Supply chain regulation. Finally, the EU member states have put in place regulation on supply chains. The so-called supply chain due diligence obliging companies to implement a due diligence process to address their adverse impact on slavery, child labor, labor exploitation, besides environmental degradation throughout across the supply chain that they participate in. France led the way by enacting the corporate duty of vigilance law 2017 applicable to French companies having at least 5,000 employees in France and 10,000 worldwide, either directly or in their subsidiaries. Such companies must establish a plan of vigilance to identify risk and forestall serious infringement of or harm to human rights and fundamental freedoms, personal health and safety. Germany enacted the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act 2022, making it mandatory for German companies with 3,000 or more employees to monitor and act on violence of human rights, including forced labor, both within their own operations as well as those of their direct suppliers. This requirement is applicable regardless of whether the activity was performed in Germany abroad. Earlier this year, the European Union member states collectively adopted the Corporate Sustainability Due to Diligence Directive 2023, making it mandatory for companies to undertake due diligence to identify and, where necessary, also prevent and or mitigate the negative impact of their duty activities and on child labor and labor exploitation. Companies must assess the impact of their activity in their value chain partners, including suppliers, sales, transport, distribution, and storage. With the developed world veering towards a strict enforcement of ILS across global supply chains, India INC can ill afford to support a weakening of labor rights. The next, a verdict that hamper international law obligations. One of the foremost challenges foreign investors face in India is uncertainty in taxation measures. Taxation related improbabilities arise not just due to the action of the executive but also the judiciary. This makes doing business in India difficult for foreign players. The Supreme Court of India's recent judgment of the accessing officer cycle International Taxation New Delhi versus MS Nestle SS case, which disposed of 11 petitions involving corporations such as Nestle, Swiss multinational company, and Steria, a European company, deserve to be seen in the light. The critical question in the case was whether the most favored nation clause in the tax treaties such as the double taxation avoidance agreement that India has signed could be given effect in India without notification for the same under section 19 of the 90 of the Income Tax Act. This provision allows India to sign tax treaties with other countries to avoid an income being taxed twice. One most featured nation status India's bilateral DTAs with the Netherlands, France, and Switzerland. All three countries are members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD), require imposing a 10% withholding tax on dividends paid by the Indian entities of foreign companies to the resident of Netherlands, France, and Switzerland. These DTAAs also contain an MFN provision. Thus, if India extend a preferential tax treatment to any third country which is a member of OECD, the same treatment should be accorded to the Netherlands, France, Switzerland under their respective DTAs. India's DTAA with Slovenia, Colombia, and Lithuania have a lower withholding tax requirement of 5%. When India signed a DTAA with these countries, they were not OECD member but joined the group later. When the matter initially came before the Delhi High Court, it held that under the MFN provision, the preferential tax in, say, the India sovereign Slovenia DTAA should extend to the India Netherlands DTAA. However, the Supreme Court overruled this, holding that when the India Netherlands DTAA was signed, Slovenia was not an OECD member, thus the benefits given to Slovenia, which became an OECD member later, do not apply to the India-Netherlands DTAA. This ruling will impose a tax burden estimated to be 11,000 crore rupees on foreign investors. It may also lead to opening past cases. This reasoning is specious because it preaches the provisions of a treaty in time. There is nothing in the text of the India Netherlands DTAA, for example, to prove that the words is a member of OECD are restricted to countries that were members on a day the treaty was signed. It is puzzling that the top court used domestic interpretative techniques to interpret a term in an international treaty. Such an interpretation defeats the purpose of including non-discrimination standards such as MFN in economic treaties. MFN in a treaty ensures that future benefits given to a third country by one of the treaty signing countries become automatically available to its treaty partners. Dualism strikes. The Supreme Court held that to give effect to the MFN provision in DTAA notification under Section 90 Clause 1 of the Income Tax Act is necessary and mandatory. Thus, the court advocated the doctrine of dualism where in international law is not enforceable domestically till it is transformed into municipal law through enabling legislation. While it is true that the Indian Constitution provides for such formal dualism, the Supreme Court has moved away from this principle toward the monist tradition of incorporating international law in the domestic legal regime, even if it is not explicitly incorporated, provided that international law is not inconsistent with domestic law. This principle has been laid down in cases such as PUCL versus India, Visakha versus State of Rajasthan, and Puttaswamy versus Union of India. The premise in these cases was the presumption of compatibility or presumption of consistency between the domestic and international law. This presumption can be rebutted only if a domestic law explicitly contravenes international law. In other words, wherever possible domestic law should be interpreted in a manner that does not contradict India's obligation under international law. This approach ensures that progressive international law is given effect by the courts to protect the rights of civil citizens and persons even if the legislature and the executive have not acted to transform it into domestic law for whatever the reason. Thus, international law is not just an interpretative tool, it has essential implications domestically. Surprisingly, the court did not refer to this line of cases in its reasoning. This decision is a setback to the progressive judicial journey unleashed by cases such as the Visakha to take international law seriously. If India had issued a notification that expressly went against the MFN provision in some of the DTAAs, one could have plausibly argued that there is an inconsistency between domestic and international law, thus the former should be given effect, not the latter. However, without a notification under Section 90 Clause 1, the court should have harmoniously interpreted India's international law obligation contained in the DTAA with that of the Income Tax Act. It should have read the DTAA provision as a part of Indian law. In any case, issuing a notification under Section 90, Clause 1 is an executive, not a legislative act. So, even from the principle of dualism, the court's reasoning is suspect. The court's interpretation allows the executive to undo its international law obligation by not issuing the relevant notification domestically. This is not a rationalizes violation of international law but also makes India susceptible to international claims under other instruments of the international law such as bilateral investment treaties. This judgment has once again proved the adage that the Supreme Court is supreme because it is final, not because it is infallible. नेक्स्ट जो है इन ट्रबल्ड वाटर इन कतर On October 26, the news from Doha that its court of first instance has awarded the death sentence to 8 Indian Navy veterans working there sent shock waves across India. The Ministry of External Affairs extended absolute support to the veterans and promised to make every effort to bring them home. A former Indian ambassador to Qatar has been charged with monitoring the case from New Delhi. This is perhaps for the first instance in 5 decades of Indian mitigation to the Gulf that any Indian nationals have been accused of involvement in a breach of local security and their culpability deemed serious enough to warrant the death penalty. This fact relating to the cause relating to the case are mere the 8 veterans, 3 captains, 4 commanders, and a sailor were employed with with a low company, Doha Global Technology and Consultancy Services. The company now closed down, provided training and other support services to the Qatari Navy. The 8 naval officials in detention since August 2022 are accused of espionage. espionage. Some sections of the media reported that the officials disclosed to the Israel the specification of an Italian submarine that Qatar contracted to obtain from an Italian company, Fincantieri, but this has not been disputed. It has been asserted authoritatively that there is no ongoing submarine contract and no Israel connection. Speculation if in the media. The absence of hard information has encouraged some of the most outlandish speculation in section of the Indian media, generally reflecting the political biases or prejudices of the author. One writer on a right-wing platform has described Qatar as acting like a vulnerable caliphate and an Islamist sanctuary, hosting an entire menagerie of terrorists. The Pakistani rule in the imbroglio is another favorite with some Indian commentators. Pakistani social media posts have been quoted to suggest that the Indian were arrested following a trip from Pakistan, while some posts on Indian social media have arrested asserted that the naval officer have been framed by Pakistani agencies. No evidence is proffered in either case. An Indian writer has speculated that the sentence is aimed at derailing India's closeness to the Israel UAE Saudi axis through such an axis has yet to emerge. He also believes that Qatar could be sending a cautionary American message to curtail India's growing assertiveness in world affairs. Since the death sentence was announced 3 weeks into the Gaza conflict, a retired Indian army officer has speculated that the Indian government's public hostility towards Hamas could have led to the sentence. In their anxiety to explain the harsh sentence, even some serious commentators have been led astray. One of them views the sentence as a challenge to the foundation of an essentially strong relationship that should provoke a rethink in India about the future sustainability of this relationship. While the sentence of the shock is understandable, the outburst of rage and prejudice serves no useful purpose. We would do well to note that Qatar, through a small Gulf state, has close ties with the US, other Western powers, and Iran and Turkey. It has been in the vanguard of regional diplomacy for over 2 decades. For over 2 decades, this role has been sustained by its serious and well-informed royal leadership, backed by outstanding diplomats. Unlike some of its neighbors, Qatar's political initiatives tend to be low-key and behind the scenes, such as its recent role in brokering US Taliban interaction in Doha, but this should not detract from the measured manner with which it approaches bilateral and regional challenges. Following from this, we should accept that the espionage case and the rule of India's naval veterans would have been thoroughly investigated and sentences pronounced only on the basis of hard evidence. However painful this might be for us, these have also been suggestion that given the close tie between India and Qatar, the result of the investigation could have been shared with the appropriate Indian officials. Again, given the harsh sentence meted out and Israel's role in the sordid imbroglio cannot be rolled out. We would do well to remember that all countries, including India, take national security matters very seriously and adopt a tough posture where espionage is involved, and hardly ever are the full details of the investigation and the judicial process brought into the public domain. Security issue. My understanding of this unfortunate matter is as follows. First, this is a stand-alone security issue and the sentence have no link with bilateral ties with India or development in regional politics. I believe this has been fully explained to the Indian official concerned. Second, during this period of detention, patience and restraint are called for for from our media. Communal abuse, name-calling, and favored speculation serve no purpose. In fact, as we saw in the Nupur Sharma matter, they only vitiate the atmosphere. This would be a good time to silence the hate factories in India and abroad that the feverishly contributing to expanding the communal divide at home in our neighborhood. Third, our focus should be on the intents behind the sense of diplomatic engagement with Qatar on freeing the veterans while publicly affirming the importance of our long-standing, substantial, and mutually beneficial ties. As Rudyard Kipling warned us, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. And next article है the massive displacement in Congo. On October 30, the United Nations International Organization of Migration (IOM) reported that the number of people who have been internally displaced in the Democratic Republic of Congo has risen to 6.9 million in the eastern province of North Kivu. Nearly a million people have been displaced due to the ongoing conflict with the rebel group movement due 23 March. What is the conflict in the DRC? The conflict in the DRC dates back to the 1990s when it went through two civil wars in 1996 and 1990. The conflict erupted in the wake of a Rwandan genocide in 1994 where ethnic Hutu extremists killed nearly 1 million minority ethnic Tutsis and non-extremist Hutus. Since then, the eastern DRC bordering Rwanda has been facing insurgency perpetrated by several rebel militant groups according to the United Nations. Beside M23, more than 120 insurgent groups are active in the eastern province of the North Kivu, South Kivu, Ituri and Tanganyika. Violence by several militant groups over territory and natural resources, extrajudicial killings by security forces, and rising tensions with neighboring countries have killed thousands. Tensions between the DRC and neighboring Rwanda continue to increase as both countries accuse each other of supporting ethnic Tutsi and Hutu-led rebel group respectively. The reshuffling of the Tutsi-led LED-M23 rebel campaign in November 2021 worsened the security situation in the eastern province of the DRC. The group carries out frequent attacks and has taken control of several towns. In November 2022, a ceasefire was mediated between the DRC and Rwanda. However, it failed after the M23 rebel announced non-compliance. The Eastern African Force and the United Nations peacekeeping force which were deployed in the to the oversee the withdrawal of the rebel group failed to achieve their objectives since January 2023. M23 has been advancing in the region who are Who are the major actors? The prominent rebel group besides M23 include the Allied Democratic Forces (ADF) and the Cooperative for Development of Congo (CODECO). ADF, the Uganda-based rebel group, has been operating since the mid 1999 in eastern DRC and have pledged their allegiance to the Islamic State in 2019. CODECO claims they aim to protect the interests of the ethnic Lendu against the Hamas and the Congo army. Then there is Rwanda, who the DRC accuses of supporting the Tutsi-led M23 group. In, in contrast, Rwanda claims the DRC support of Hutu militia who carried out the Rwanda genocide in 1994 and fled to eastern DRC. Both countries deny to the other allegation. We also have the East African Community. In November 2022, the EAC deployed its troops in eastern DRC to stem the violation. The forces were from Kenya, South Sudan, Burundi, and Uganda. However, since August, widespread protests have been ongoing, demanding the withdrawal of the EAC and United Nations peacekeeping forces. Protesters accuse the regional and international forces of failing to address the insurgency. DRC President Felix Tshisekedi has demanded the EAC to leave the country by December 8. Why has there been displacement? First, ethnic intolerance and insurgency. Following the Rwanda genocide, around 2 million Hutu refugees crossed Rwanda into North Kivu and South Kivu provinces of DRC. They organized ethnic militia in DRC fearing prosecution. Tension intensified as Rwanda Tutsis organized a militia against the Hutus who fled to the DRC. Subsequently, several ethnic and Ethnic groups who felt threatened started organizing their militia against each other. The multiple rebel groups and several actors fighting in the regions have carried out widespread killing, sexual violence, and massive human rights atrocities. Second is the political uncertainty and a lack of inclusive governance. President Flexi Sekedi came to power in 2019 through the democratic election. The country is to hold the election on December 20. However, the Electoral Commission has said that continuing the insecurity in the parts of the country would pose a challenge to a free, democratic, and transparent vote. Meanwhile, the peripheries of the DRC are ruled by the numerous ethnic chiefdoms which are recognized by the domestic government. The grievances of these peripheries are not met inclusively as the struggles for the representation, power, territory, and the resources are being ignored. The third are the regional tensions. The armed groups have been supported by the government of Rwanda, Uganda and Burundi at various points, acting as a proxies for each country's interest in the region. All of these have led to the fourth factor, which is a humanitarian crisis. According to the Kivu Security Tractor, this year alone 1,400 people were killed and over 600 attacks were reported in the region, according to the World Food Programme. The crisis has left more than 1.1 million people in need of the food support across North Kivu, Ituri, and South Kivu, and finally the feeble international response. International actors have failed to make a considerable effort to address the crisis, according to the organizations such as WFP and the Norwegian Refugee Council. Lack of funding is a major challenge in assisting Congolese people facing hunger, starvation, and humanitarian crisis. The next day, how are the MiG-21 fighter jet being phased out? On October 31, 2023, MiG-21 fighter jet of the number 1 Squadron OORI Urials of the Indian Air Force IAF flew one last time over Uttarlai in Rajasthan. The squadron has been operating the MiG-21 since 1966 and is now being re-equipped with the Sukhoi 30 MKI aircraft, said Colonel Amitabh Sharma, pro-defense Rajasthan, in a statement. The IAF is now at 31 fighter squadron as against the sanctioned strength of 42 squadron. What What role did the MiG-21 jet play? The MiG-21 was the fastest supersonic fighter in the service of IF and was inducted in 1963 and has participated in all major conflicts since. More than 800 variants of the supersonic fighter have been inducted into service, and it remained the frontline fighter jet of the IAF for a long time. For instance, the number 4 squadron have served the country for approximately 6 decades and has significantly contributed to the war effort during the Indo-Pak conflict, Colonel Sharma noted. Last year, the number 51 squadron Squadrons based in Srinagar was phased out. It was the same squadron of which GP capped then WGCDR Arindam Bardhaman was part of, and saw action in the February 2019, a day after the Balakot airstrike. The squadron was raised at Chandigarh on February 1, 1985 under the command of WGCDR VK Chawla and moved to Srinagar on May 1, 1986. It was initially equipped with MiG-21 Type 75 aircraft and later converted to the upgraded MiG-21 Bison in January 2004. The IAF now has two MiG squadrons in service comprising the upgraded Bison variant and the number 3 Squadron Cobras at the Buccaneer and number 23 Squadron Panthers at Suratgarh, which will be phased out by 2025 as started by Chief Air Chief Marshal ACM Vivek Ram Chaudhary. We will we will stop flying the MiG-21 fighter aircraft by 2025 and we will replace the MiG-21 Squadron with the indigenous light combat aircraft sorry, LCA-Mk-1A. The induction of LCA Mark 1A will fill the gap of these MiG-21s. He had said the IAF operated 24 fighter squadron and 4 training units equipped with the MiG-21 throughout the service. In these 28 establishments, the average tenure of the MiG-21 aircraft were 33 years. The transition of the MiG-21 began with the number 28 Squadron in 1963 and the number of 20 Squadron was the last, albeit briefly, in the late 1990s. Writes Anchit Gupta and an aviation historian on his blog in history in number 4 Squadron holds the distinction of serving the longest with the MiG-21 for nearly 58 years. If number 3 Squadron continues its service until 2025, it will be the second longest serving unit at 53 years according to the IAF website. During the 1971 War of Bangladesh, the MiG-21s showed its true grit. Although Pakistan has initiated the war with preemptive air strikes against major forward air bases, the IAF rapidly gained the initiative and had thereafter dominated the strikes over the both fronts. Six squadrons of MiG-21 FLs were part of the IAF order of the battle, participating in operating operations both in the eastern and western sector. It says on the 1999 Kargil conflict, the IAF says that night operations were carried out using ingenuity and immigrations at times. Excellent results were achieved by the aircraft using little else but a stopwatch and the GPS receiver. These operations had a significant effect on the enemy's resilience, stamina, and very will to fight. In the course of 6 decades, the MiG-21 fleet saw over 400 accidents, claiming the lives of around 200 pilots. The IF was to phase out the MiG-21 much earlier, but it was extended as newer inductions, especially the LCA Tejas, were delayed. What about the MiG replacement? In the last few years, the IAF has inducted two squadrons of LCA Tejas and two squadrons of Rafale fighter jets procured from France, which pushed the squadron strength to over 330. In January 2021, the IAF signed a contract with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited for 83 LCA Mk1A, which it will start receiving from early 2024 onwards. A larger LCA Mark II as well as the fifth generation advanced medium combat aircraft are under development as they take time to be available in large numbers. It is the LCA Mk1 which will form the bulk of the force. Last month, ACM Chaudhary has had said that they are looking to procure additional 97 LCA-Mk1A at an estimated cost of 67,000 lakh over, making a total of 180 Mk1 variants. The next is understanding the fundamentals of how electricity is transmitted. When Indian first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru visited the planned site of the Bhakra Nangal Dam in Bilaspur 1954, he called the dams the temples of modern India. Contained in his tone of phrases were many indicators about the way India was developed in the coming decades, but it also spoke to the centrality of electricity in the modern national of the nation of the foundation that power transmission laid for development. Since energy exists in many forms like light, sound, heat, etc., power and power transmission also exist in many forms For example, mechanical power in a car is transmitted using gears. However, electric power transmission is more complicated because of the multiple phase of electric current and the factors like voltage, impedance, frequency, etc. Any power supply system has three broad components: generation, transmission, and distribution. So electricity is generated at power plants as well as at smaller renewable energy installations. Then it is transmitted using a distributed network of stations, substations, switches, overhead and underground cables, and transformers, among the other elements. Finally, it is distributed to consumers in a standardized way befitting the needs of various machines and applications. What are the basis of transmitting electricity? First, in any conductor that transport electricity current, the transmission efficiency is higher at lower current and higher voltage. This is because the energy loss during the transmission increases as the square of the current, whereas the amount of voltage increase correspond to on an 1 is to 1 basis with the amount of current decrease. This is if voltage is increased by 5 units, the amount of current will drop by 5 units, but the amount of energy lost will be reduced by 25 units. This is the purpose of transformer. They increase the voltage and reduce the current before feeding into transmission lines, and the reverse while when receiving current to be supplied to consumer. Transmission cable can be seen transporting current at 1115 kilovolt to 30 kilovolt etc. For this reason, however, more than 2000 kilovolt of or so is infeasible because then air itself becomes conducting, causing the cable to leak current. Second, the cables that move the current still have some resistance, which results in some energy loss. The amount of loss can be controlled by adjusting the cable's thickness. The thicker it is, the less energy is lost, but the cost increases. So, when the cost of the cable's material is high, the cables are thinner. Third, the longer distance of transmission, the lower the transmission cost. All these factors are further complicated by the use of alternating current. AC can be modified more easily in the transformer than direct currents and also have higher transmission efficiency. But when the AC frequency is higher and the amount of resistance the current encounter in the material increases, engineers model all these factors for a given network to understand how much electrical energy will be lost between the generation and the consumption. What is AC power? This most common way to transfer electric power is in the form of three-phase AC. In AC, voltage flips polarity. If one polarity urges the current to flow in one direction, the opposite polarity urges the current to flow the other way. The AC frequency is equal to voltage flipping frequency. Imagine this voltage change to the mapped to a circle. It completes one semicircle 180 degree from the top to bottom. As it flips one way, when it flips the other way, it completes the other semicircle 180 degree and is back to its starting point. In a three-phase AC circuit, there are at least three wires. When current start to follow a wire in wire A, the voltage is at 120 degrees in the wire B. It is 240 volt in the and in wire C it is 360 degree. These are the phase 3. These are the three phases. All the all three wires transport AC power consumers. For example, household receive three such wires from where they can draw power for various appliances. These appliances are also designed to use AC because it is easier to control than DC. How is the power transmitted? In a three-phase AC circuit, each wire transmits an AC current in a different phase from a power station. The wires are route to transformers that step up their voltage, then They are suspended from transmission towers which must be stable and properly wired as they travel long distances. Insulators in contract with the wires draw away from some current if there is a surge in the line. Circuit breakers break the circuit if there is too much. The tower are also grounded and equipped with arresters that prevent sudden increases in the voltage such as due to a lightning strike from affecting the wires. Similarly, dampers prevent vibration in the wires from affecting the tower's stability. Switches are used to control the availability of current and to move current between the different lines. These wires eventually led to and exit from different kinds of substations. For example, collectors collect power incoming from different sources and relay them to transmission substations, converts, modify and the AC frequency distribution substations step down the voltage in power lines and prepare them for consumption. Transmission substations to merge or fork different lines and diagnose problems in different lines. All these centers require their own support and safety infrastructure, from electrical engineers to fire protections, from connection to computerized operation to facilitators for staffs. There are also many other elements and setups to platform perform various other functions in keeping with the sophisticated needs of an entire economic region. How do grids operate? As mentioned earlier, transmission is situated between production and distribution. A national grid includes all three components, and as a result, transmission also has to account for the particulars of power production at different types of sources at various locations and how and where the power is consumed. For example, some sources like coal-fired or nuclear reactor can produce energy continuously, whereas renewable energy sources are intermittent. So grids also have storage facilities that store electrical energy when there is a surplus supply and release it times to deficit. There are also connected to the sources like gas turbines that can provide power on short notice, such as during emergencies, as well as automated systems that tell sources to increase or decrease their output in response to fluctuating consumer demand. Grid also need to respond to failure in different parts of the network and prevent them from carrying over to the other parts, adjust voltage in response to demand as well as manage demand, control the AC frequency, improve the power factor, the power drawn by a load versus the power available in a circuit. A grid becomes a wide area synchronous grid if all the generators connected to it are producing an AC current at the same frequency. The world's largest such grid covers Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, and Russia. The world's most powerful is the North Chinese state grid with a connected capacity of 1700 gigawatt. India's national grid is also a wide area synchronous grid. Such grids result in low power cost but also require measures to prevent cascading power supply failures. And next है आदित्य L1 captures first glimpse of solar flares. And second का है 7.5 million new cases of TB in 2022 shows WHO global report. The high energy L1 orbiting X-ray spectrometer Helios payload on board the Aditya L1 spacecraft has captured the first glimpse of solar flares. Aditya L1, the first space-based India mission to study the sun, is currently on its journey to the destination of the sun, Earth. L1.L1, the Indian Space Research Organization, on Tuesday said the Helios payload has captured the first high-energy X-ray glimpse of the solar flares during its first observation October 29. Helios recorded the impulsive phase of our of solar flares. The recorded data is consistent with the X-ray light curves provided by National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's geostationary operational environmental satellites. The next is 7.5 million new cases of TB in 2022 shows WHO global report. There was a major global recovery in the number of people diagnosed with the TB and treated in 2022 after the 2 years of COVID related disruption, says the just released WHO global TB report. While this has started to reserve or moderate, TB remains the world's second leading cause of death from a single infectious agent, and the global TB targets have ei- either been missed or remain off track. The net reduction of the 2015-2022 was 8.7%, far, far from WHO and TB strategy milestone of a 50% reduction by the 2025. The reported global number of people newly diagnosed with the TB was 7.5 million in 2022. This is the highest number since WHO began global TB monitoring in 1995, above the pre-COVID baseline and previous historical peak of 7.1 million in 2019, and up from 5.8 million in 2020 and 6.4 million in 2021. The number in 2022 probably includes a sizable backlog of people who developed TB in previous years but whose diagnosis and treatment was delayed by COVID-related disruption that affected access to and provision of health services. According to the report, India, Indonesia and the Philippines, which collectively accounted for nearly 60% of the reduction in the number of people newly diagnosed with TB in 2020 and 2021, recovered to above 2019 level in 2022. TB caused an estimated 1.30 million deaths in 2022, again almost back to the level of 2019. COVID-related disruption was estimated to have resulted in almost half a million excess deaths from TB in the 3 years 2020 to 2022. Then last आज का जो article है, where do domesticated skillworm cocoons get their wild color from? Silk, the queen of fibers, is drawn or relied from cocoons of the silk moth. Humans domesticated it more than 5,000 years ago in China from the wild moth. The ancestral moth is today found in China, the Korean Peninsula, Japan, and far eastern Russia, whereas the domesticated moth is reared all over the world, including India. In fact, India is the world's second largest producer of raw silk after China. Caterpillars, also known as the silkworms, of both these species feed exclusively on leaves of mulberry plants genus Moros. The domesticated moth is much larger than its wild progenitor and thus extrudes a longer silk fibers to build its larger cocoons up to 900 meters long. But it depends wholly on human care for its survival and reproduction. Since having been domesticated, it has lost the ability to fly, and since it is needed for camouflage no longer exists, it has also lost its caterpillar and adult stage pigmentation. Then carotenoid and flavonoids. Wild silk, which include the Muga tussar and eri silk, are obtained from the other moth species, namely Antheria asama, Antheria milita, and Samia cynthia ricina. These moths survive relatively independently of human care, and their caterpillars forage on a wider variety of trees. Non-mulberry silk comprise about 30% of all silk produced in India. These silk have shorter, coarser, and harder threads compared to the long, fine, and smooth threads of the mulberry silk. The ancestral mulberry moth makes boring uniform brown-yellow cocoons. In contrast, domesticated silk moth cocoons come in an eye-catching palette of yellow, red, gold, flesh pink, and pale green, deep green, and or white. Human hurdles, human handlers select the differently colored cocoons whenever they emerged, possibly in the hope of breeding of colors silk, but they were disappointed. The pigments that colored the cocoons are water soluble, so they gradually fade away. The colored silk we see in the market are instead produced by using the acid dyes. We know today that cocoons pigments are derived from chemical compounds called carotenoids and flavonoids, which are made by the mulberry leaves. Silkworms feed voraciously on the leaves, absorb the chemicals in their mygot, transport them via a hemolymph arthropods analog of blood to the silk gland, where they are taken up and bound to the silk protein. Mature mature caterpillar then spin out the silk protein and associated pigment into a single fiber. The caterpillar wraps the fiber around itself to build the cocoons, mutant strains. The adult moth hatches from cocoons. In this process, the fiber is broken in many places. Superior quality silk, however, comes from an unbroken fiber, so unhatched cocoons are used for reeling. This is a contentious economic versus ethics debate here about the creating a species that depends wholly on humans and whose unhatched cocoons we drown is in hot water for better quality silk, but that is for another articles. The differently colored cocoons arise from mutation is genes responsible for uptake, transport and modification of carotenoids and flavonoids. The mutual strains have become a valuable resource for scientists to study the molecular bias of how, in a relatively short span of 5,000 years, artificial selection generated such as speculators. Diversity research on silk domestication has largely been conducted in China and Japan, although scientists from India, including from the Center for DNA Fingerprinting and Diagnostics in Hyderabad, where this author worked, have also made some important contributions. Combinations behind the colors. This said earlier this year, researchers in Southwest University in Chongqing, China proposed a model to explain how different combination of a mutation give rise to different colors of the cocoons. They found that the formation of a yellow-red cocoons requires a Y gene which enroutes a protein that transports a carotenoid from midgut to the silk gland. Other genes encode a protein that selectively absorb specific carotenoids. Mutation in one or more of these genes produce the yellow flesh colored rusty and pink cocoons. If the Y gene is mutated, the flavonoids are absorbed but carotenoid are not, resulting in green colors. Furthering whether the green is dark or light depends on whether genes for other proteins that enhance flavonoid uptake are normal or mutated. If both carotenoids and flavonoids are not taken off, the cocoons remains white. The researchers showed that a cluster of five closely related genes was responsible for the uptake of flavonoids. The gene called aponitic, like domesticated and ancestral mulberries silk moth, can be interbred to produce hybrid offerings. Last year, researchers in the University of Tokyo and Columbia University in New York created such hybrid moths and then specifically muted either their B. mori and B. mondariana derived copy of a gene called opontic like. The hybrid caterpillars, like their wild parent, made the pigment called the melanin, but when the B. mandariana derived copy of opontic like was mutated, the hybrid failed to make melanin. This did not happen when the B. mori derived copy was mutated, however. The implications was that the domesticated silkworms apontic like gene has lost the ability of the support melanin production. Both versions of the apontic gene like genes make the same protein. Therefore, the difference between them was attributable to differences in the sequence that regulate when and where the genes was turned on or off. Gene by gene. Silk is an atom of domestication comparable in its success to basmati rice, Alfonso mangoes, and golden retrievers. Today, the tools are at the hand for scientists to make and compare genetically identical hybrid silk moths that differ only in which the gene's two parental versions is inactivated, domesticated, or ancestral. This paves the way for scientists to work out gene by gene all the key steps that led to silk moth domestication. Hopefully, someday soon similar techniques will become available for us to analyze domestication in rice, mangoes, and dogs. So friends, this is all for today, and we will meet from tomorrow onwards with a new news article from the Hindu newspaper. So till then, keep studying. Thank you a lot.